I'm just going to speak a couple of minutes at the most about the role of a financial planner in the whole separation process and divorce process. I'm sure you'd agree that going through separation and divorce is an incredibly emotional experience, and the last thing that people want to deal with is the particulars of their finances. For example, you've got to drop a separation agreement. I mean, you can use a lawyer to do that, or you can do it yourself, I suppose, but it would be better to use a lawyer. You've got to discuss child support and alimony. Expenses need to be altered, assets need to be split, insurance changes need to be implemented, and so on. The job of a good financial planner is to work with your lawyer. One of the things you'll get is a form that needs to be filled out. It talks about assets, when the value of your assets at the time of your marriage and the value of the assets at the time of your separation. A financial planner can help you with that. In addition, what I have helped people with in the past is budgeting. Some expenses will need to be eliminated and reduced and changed. For example, will the family continue to make registered educational savings plan payments? Can they continue with those? Will the spouses be able to continue to fund camp and sports activities for the children? Will separate vacations be taken, or will the divorced or separated people go on a vacation with their children together? I've actually seen that happen. What will be done with homes, second properties, third properties, other assets, mortgages, insurance? Insurance beneficiaries may need to be changed. The insurance policy might be part of the divorce agreement. And how should the RSPs and pensions be split up in the most tax-efficient manner? So these are the types of decisions I can help the client with, because again, it's so emotional. They don't want to deal with these kinds of details, especially if they don't have a head for finances, which many people don't. So that's about it, I guess. Basically, if any of you have any questions of me, I'll be available at the break. I'd also be happy to sit down with any of you who are interested and talk for about a half hour about your particular situation. So remember, financial professionals can help ease the burden in a challenging time. So I'm going to be introducing Pamela Richardson. She has been kind enough to donate hundreds of her book, A Kidnapped Mind. Pamela has hosted television's The Saturday Show and The Vancouver Show. She has written and produced pieces for magazines and other television programs. Today, she's a full-time mother to her 2 teenage boys and lives in Vancouver with her husband, David. She continues to work with many school and community organizations, speaking at private and public events, meeting with legal professionals, counselors, other parents whose children have been alienated from them, as well as the media and other groups, bringing a much-needed awareness of the damage that can be done by alienating a child from a once loved parent. So please join me in welcoming Pamela.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you for inviting me here today. I would like to say what a privilege it is for me to be amongst this prestigious company. I'd also have an announcement. Our new mayor, Greg Robertson, has declared April 25th Parental Alienation Awareness Day in Vancouver. My book, A Kidnapped Mind, tells an almost textbook case study of severe entrenched PAS. Parental alienation and parental alienation syndrome are issues my family lived with for years, many of them without any real knowledge or resources. The fact that I am standing here today at a national symposium about PAS is a testimony to the great progress being made over difficult terrain. We've come a long way. 16 years ago, Clawar and Revelin published Children Held Hostage. That study was commissioned by the American Bar Association Family Law Section in response to rising concern about what they called the parental programming of children in order to influence the outcome of custody disputes. It found that programming was practiced in varying degrees by 80% of divorcing parents, with 20% of them engaging in it with their children every day. Even at low levels, this programming had significant impacts on children. My family lived through PAS. My son, Dashiell Hart, who would be 24 now, suffered through the whole gamut of tactics that are employed by alienating parents. These children become enmeshed in the alienating parent's power struggle with the target parent. In combination with an evisceration of the other parent's access time, the PAS child is taught day and night, subtly and not so subtly, through repetitive bad-mouthing, sometimes outright lies, that the other parent is unfair, unreliable, then idiotic, uncaring, and disinterested, then dangerous. The alienating parent's attempt at enforcing their access is seen as an attempt to break up their happy household. The alienated parent becomes an enemy. I am aware that for some, PAS is a controversial theory, and for others, it is so problematic a concept as to warrant being sidelined so that debate on other divorce issues is not hijacked. I understand this, and I have been very patient. But I strongly believe that PAS is real. My son Dash took on a significant role in his own estrangement from me, a previously dearly loved parent. At first, when he was 6, 7, and 8 years old, it was small things. Our garage wasn't as big as his father's garage. He had a bigger treehouse at his dad's. Later, Dash would tell me he wouldn't see me until I stopped trying to get my access enforced by the courts. Later again, as a child not even 12, he would wear his father's clothes to court, a heartbreaking sign of solidarity. After years of programming, this self-estrangement is done to please the alienating parent, as the child tries to wrest some fragment of peace and security in his or her life. PAS children can't relax. They can't have a childhood. They are kept poised for battle, appraised of every grisly detail of every access and custody hearing by the alienating parent, where good parents will strive to keep their children out of such ugly adult affairs. Alienating parents don't. Dash was told he had known everything from day one. Dash is going to hear about this as soon as he gets home. It is presented as ongoing proof about how imperiled the child is, that the other parent is dangerously close to the gates. Dr. Peggy Ward wrote, "The willingness of a parent to directly involve a child in the litigation should be a red flag that the parent may well be using the child to further his own agenda, even if the child is apparently acquiescent." This acquiescence is actually fear. Children who are undergoing alienation live with constant fear. The alienating parent targets the bond between the other parent and the child and breaks it by making access time with the parent simply fade away. This is done, at least in the beginning with me, right under my nose. Various games kept Dash and I from speaking freely on the telephone. I would be told that Dash was out, but then a quiet little voice on the other headset would say, "I'm right here, Dad." Other times, Dash and I would chat happily away. Then Dash would hear the front door open and say, "I've got to go," and hang up. Physical times are targeted. Time is simply lost. And the reason seems so reasonable, but for the pattern underlying it all. Friday nights wiped out because of soccer practice. Wednesday dinner because the child is tired from school and homework. Saturdays because there's a party, a sleepover, a dinner party. Most of these will be contrived, and it will work only one way. Alienated parents find that it is only them that give up the access time for soccer, homework, sleepovers, and parties. Sometimes it's more overt. And I was told by another mother in the neighborhood that a cry would go up when I would arrive to pick up Dash. "Dash, it's your mom, run and hide. You don't want to go with her." Whatever methods are employed, it is always the alienated parent that loses time. The other parent always gains it. So despite having the access order for 50% of Dash's time, I soon went months without seeing him. When Dash was 11, I saw him a total of 24 hours that whole year. Whatever methods are employed, there are transfers of time followed by transfers of power. And children know enough to keep themselves safe. A shift takes place in the child's mind. This is the heartbreak of PAS. Children are forced to choose between their parents because, in their mind, they've already lost one parent and they're terrified of losing the other. Any sense of security, however, that the child gains through the transference of loyalty is fleeting. The destruction of a strong, loving parent-child bond, such as the one Dash and I had, can only be assimilated one way, and that's through self-loathing. Rebellion, isolation, and a crushing depression follow. Dash's teachers saw it, and their friends and his friends started to wall themselves off. Parents who didn't even know me would call and ask, "Is your son okay?" I didn't know. But no one ever called me to say, "My, what a fine young man Dash is growing into." Living with PAS as a parent is also living with fear. Dr. Terence Campbell asked the question here, why doesn't parental alienation occur more frequently? I say, thank God it doesn't. Because ripping a child away from a parent he previously loved and relied on, as children do, is abuse. Creating self-loathing in a child is child abuse. Under any reasonable definition, parental alienation is child abuse. Yet this disorder has gone virtually unrecognized and unnoticed except for committed professionals like those in the room here today. And mums and dads like me who are forced to fight just to see the children they love, to have a relationship with them, and to protect them. With PAS children, there are generally no outward or tangible signs of maltreatment. There are no bruises or fractures to draw professional attention from child protection agencies, police, and court-appointed psychologists. There is no intrigue, no mystery, no Elizabeth Smart, no Patty Hearst story, no kidnappers. Instead, there are unfathomable stories, like mine, and Lady Catherine Mayer's. When her children were abducted and whisked to Germany by their father, within weeks, the children professed to never wanting to see their mother again. Under the watchful eye of the alienating parent and his family, the children refused to open the Christmas presents she sent them. When Catherine flew to Germany to try and meet them at the school gate, they screamed and ran away. Instead of bruises, the wounds of PAS children are buried deep inside their hearts. While this disorder affects many thousands of families in North America, probably tens of thousands, it goes largely unrecognized at the professional or legal level. Many judges refuse to see it and play it safe. They listen carefully when they are told, "I want to stay where I am." They empower the programmed child, as though such a child can possibly decide what is in their own best interests. They see disordered loyalty, this folie à deux, as love. But it is as Bone and Walsh said in their 1999 book, any attempt at alienating the children from the other parent should be seen as a direct and willful violation of one of the prime duties of parenthood. For the 12 years that I was in the court system, it was not seen that way by any of those making the decisions. Maybe it's still believed that no parent would wound their child for their own selfish gain. The falsity of such a claim would be obvious to anyone who works with battered children. Maybe people still believe that the loss of a parent is not that big of a deal. Parents get sick, have car accidents, get cancer, they die. But alienated parents aren't dead, and the children know it. They don't have the luxury of just feeling grief. They also feel the sharp slap of rejection, however contrived that is, as well as isolation and the loss of the support they relied on for years before the divorce. I think also that groups with agendas have hijacked any rational debate we might have had about PAS. One group will blame bitter and twisted moms. Another will blame aggressive or deadbeat dads wanting to shirk child support payments. But it has been said earlier, it isn't about dads and it isn't about moms. PAS is genderless. In fact, a lot of the issues in my case are ones that men's groups have been vocal about for years. For example, men's groups have called for denial of access to be made an offense. If such a law was in place when my family was in the system, Dash's PAS may not have become entrenched. In its absence, an alienated parent must try and have the other parent cited for contempt of court, which in Canada anyway is a hit and miss affair if there ever was one. And once yet again, in the child's eyes, it puts the rejected parent in a face-off with the parent they live with. Let me repeat. PAS has nothing to do with mums or dads. It has everything to do with who has custody. It is a crime of calculation and opportunity. arguing about whether PAS is really a syndrome, or whether it's a mental health disorder, or whether it's really abuse, just ties everyone up in knots, while real children and real families suffer this horror. The fact that PAS exists within custody and access disputes only complicates matters further. The court's focus on the parent's financial obligations in custody disputes further obscures the far more insidious problem of programming and alienation. Action can seem impossible when other real factors exist, such as previous abusive behavior or bitterly contested custody and child support payments. What needs to be understood is that a child's fundamental right to be loved by both his or her parents is destroyed in PAS. The best interests of the children are not met on any level in cases involving programming and alienation. But emotional abuse is a disease we can cure with knowledge and action, and this conference is a positive step in the right direction. When I was in the court system between 1989, yes, I'm that old, and 2000, there were no legal strategies to follow in PAS cases. I tried everything, going in hard, going in soft. I tried to work within the system and outside of it. Over 12 years, I had 4 different sets of lawyers trying to convince the courts my son, who lived less than 10 minutes' drive from me, needed to see the mother who loved and raised him. I call my book A Kidnapped Mind because I felt so strongly, even before the alienation was diagnosed, that Dash's mind had been taken, along with his heart, and replaced with the thoughts his father held. In 1999, Anita Vestal published a study which examined parental alienation syndrome and recommended that mediation needed to address 4 areas of concern: the need for mental health expertise, the assurance that the court will take swift judicial action to discourage stalling and deception by the aligned parent, the need to balance the power discrepancy felt by the rejected parent, and an ongoing process to monitor cooperation with court orders. But in severe cases of PAS, Vestal recommends that mediation not be used at all, in part because of dishonesty, deception, and an unwillingness to cooperate displayed by the alienating parent. These parents, she says, are skilled at convincing the mediator of their sincerity and create a bias that could be harmful for the rejected parent and child, and are not candidates for counseling because they are convinced they're right. Any problem in the relationship are the other parent's fault. Dr. Rena Summer, who wrote the foreword to my book, has this to say about alienating parents. They might easily be mistaken for ideal parents because they profess love and concern for their children. But in their overwhelming commitment to meet their own needs first, they destroy the relationship their children have with the other parent at all costs. I've heard it said more than once that alienating parents hate their ex more than they love their child. Parents that alienate, in my personal opinion, are, if not bona fide pathological, at least convinced in an absolute and paranoid way that they are right. In other words, they won't stop. Dash had told me that he would see me if I dropped custody proceedings. So I did. But nothing changed. I saw him, as I mentioned, a total of 24 hours in a whole year. But I never believed that that is what he wanted. As Clowar and Rivelin reported in 1991, 80% of alienated children want the programming, as Anita Vestal puts it, detected and terminated. Further, she said, there is often a substantial difference between a child's expressed opinion and his or her real desires, needs, and behaviors. I listened with great interest to Dr. Mackay's talk, asking whether professionals aided and abetted parental alienation. Here's my spin. The whole system, both psychology and law, seemed totally resistant to the idea that what Dash was going through was not just the strain of divorce, or the pressure of school, or the normal stresses of growing into a teenager, but a much more malign force. PAS children are suffering, and to a parent, it shows. They sob. They act out in frustration and despair. They don't act their age. And of course, they don't visit. And they don't call. I showed the courts the 7-year-old boy who could not sleep at my house unless he was curled up between my husband and me. The 8-year-old boy who told other parents, I have a bad life. And the 9-year-old boy who threatened to jump out of a 2-story window at school. And they all saw the 12-year-old boy who took the stand in his father's clothes and testified about the terrible things I'd supposedly done. On the stand when he was 11 and a half years old, testifying for his father, he said, I can't remember, 23 times. It was obvious to me. But to the system we were enmeshed in, it was only in hindsight that the story knitted together. The court psychologist was left discredited. The judges looked completely out of touch. And while there is more acceptance now, I think courts are still fundamentally ill-equipped to identify this disorder in its earliest stages before the damage is done. So yes, the professionals aid and abet PAS. But my case demonstrates how much the alienated parent needs professionals too. If you're a parent watching your child suffer this abuse, you need to call in the professionals. You need them to believe you. You need them to ask, why would this child, who has had a warm, loving, caring, reciprocal relationship with the non-custodial parent, suddenly reject the same parent? Why does the other parent never hear from the child except when the parent calls? Why isn't the child encouraged to have a relationship with the other parent? Why isn't this child thriving? I had protested all the way. I'm a good mom, and Dash's reasons aren't reasons at all. Getting the smallest piece of pie, complaining that our home life was over-regimented, no fun. I could do no right, and his father could do no wrong. our court-appointed psychologist through 2 custody trials simply didn't want to see. But 10 years later, getting a child advocate in my case proved crucial. The child advocate didn't care about me, didn't care about Dash's father. She went in to bat for Dash, and Dash alone, and told the judge in no uncertain terms, Dash doesn't remember these things happening, but he knows that he has been told that his mother had done a variety of things that were terrible, that he couldn't trust her. She was a liar. His memories have been augmented. Alienated parents need professionals. They also need the government. In 1999, the Minister of Justice and the Attorney General of Canada outlined the government's strategy for reforming the system of child custody and access in Canada in a report called For the Sake of the Children. The continuing adversarial approach in family law had poorly served 2 generations of children and families. And a new child-centered approach was seen as desirable, and a shift in the focus away from parents' rights to parents' responsibilities. For the Sake of the Children examined high-conflict divorce as part of its wider inquiry. The committee made special mention of cases where a child decides that he or she does not want to visit one parent or the other. It was seen as a serious problem, warranting immediate intervention. It made a series of recommendations, primarily involved with early identification and intervention. But as far as parental alienation syndrome went, the committee was still caught up in acknowledging problems with applicability of the concept. Still, government recognition of these huge problems has been a gratifying first step. It has been 10 years since reforms of the child custody and access system began, and I want to see government action and community sentiment filter up to the judges. I want more of them to say what an appellant judge in Ohio said. It is the duty of each parent to foster and encourage the child's love and respect for the other parent, and that the failure of that duty is as harmful to the child as the failure to provide food, clothing, or shelter. Perhaps it is more harmful because no matter how well fed or how well clothed, a child cannot be happy if he feels unloved by one of his parents. I want to talk briefly about what alienated parents can do to help their children. They have to continue to look for solutions. They have to scour the legal system. They have to go back until someone will listen and enforce even some access, enough to work with. They have to rouse all those in a position to help. Teachers, specialists, even the government who can appoint a child advocate, as in my case. On the home front, along with refusing to accept that no interest or contact with a previously loved parent is healthy or desirable, part of the responsibility that comes with being a mom or dad to an alienated child is not doing the things that the other parent does. So, no pressure, no manipulation, and no lies. Alienated parents have to pile on understanding and love. Every week in 100 tiny ways, with cookies left on the doorstep, or a conch shell, or other little gifts, with a daily phone call, I gave Dash a commitment I believed he privately relied on, that I would always keep trying to see him. I would love him no matter what happened now or what would happen in the future. And no matter what he said to me, no matter how often I went to his house to get him at the appointed access time 2 or 3 times a week to find an empty house, from the margins of Dash's life, I was keeping his mother alive to him. I was showing him what unconditional love was. And I knew to do one thing, something so crucial and so fundamental for all alienated parents: never give up. Thank you.
Words cannot express my gratitude to Pamela for her time coming here today, for her generosity in donating all of her books to our attendees today. Please give another welcome to her for being here today. Thank you so much. I want to say before we leave, please come back for this evening's program. This is a program this evening you don't want to miss. Dr. Michael Bone, Pamela, and Bob Hawk from the Rachel House are going to be here. It's going to be sensational, I promise you. Have a good dinner. I'll see you later this evening for the reception and this evening's program. Thank you.